So you're back with us here on Rise Exchange. Nigeria's headline inflation climbed to 22.04% last month. That's according to the latest Statistics Office report that was released over the weekend. But beyond inflation in markets is the global financial stability question raised at the just concluded World Bank and IMF spring meetings. Putting all of this together for me tonight is Chukwu. He is a licensed dealer and the group CEO at Carry Asset Management. Thanks for kicking off the market week on this side tonight. It's good to have you on the show. Well, what's your reading? Let's start with inflation. What do you make of the latest inflation report for the month of March?
Yeah, Boston, it reconfirms some of the positions I've always maintained, that inflation today is not driven by liquidity injection or credit expansion. That the inflationary pressure we're facing today is a structural issue. If you recall, the time the inflation rate when central banks started to increase interest rate was just about 15.9%. And over time, CBN has increased interest rate by more than 650 basis points. Yet inflationary pressures are now abated. We have moved from 15.9% in April 2022 to 22.04%. And if you look at those factors driving inflation, the core of it is food and non-alcoholic beverages, which increased by more than 11% year on year in the month of March. So if we don't address the core pressures that are driving inflation, monetary tightening has not solved the problem and does not look like it's going to solve the problem.
Well, what would it mean, therefore, for the markets ahead next month's central bank's policy rate decisions for the second time in the new year? Well,
interestingly, like I just said, taking it from what I just said earlier, that tightening may not solve the problem. We've seen the central bank move monetary policy rate from 11.5% in May 2022, when they started tightening this round of tightening, to about 18% in its January meeting. And yet, we've not seen the inflationary pressure abate. Rather, it looks like the tightening is further fueling inflationary pressure because we are seeing a higher interest rate on loans. I mean, banks are getting higher interest rates, and that is being passed on to the cost of goods and services or cost of goods produced. So I think the central bank, the Monetary Policy Committee, need to rethink their approach to fighting inflation, given that over the almost 1 year when we started tightening, by the May meeting, it will be 1 year of tightening. We've increased rate by 650 basis points. We've increased cash reserve ratio by 500 basis points, and yet the inflationary pressure has continued. So we need to address the core of the problem, which is the issue of food production, which is the issue of exchange rate, pass-through effect of exchange rate, which is the issue of higher cost of landing cost of fuel and other petroleum products. Those are the core problems, and they're not going to be solved by tightening. So I think the Monetary Policy Committee must rethink its approach to managing inflation.
Okay, well, give me your takeaways from the first quarter CMC meeting last week. It was virtual and quite a whole lot of points seem to come out from there. What are the key points there for you that takes us from the Nigerian markets to the rest of the year?
Well, I think starting from the issue of market infrastructure, I mean, the CMC meeting, Capital Market Committee meeting, dealt extensively on market infrastructure, such as commodity exchange infrastructure, financial inclusion or financial literacy, issues around direct cash settlement and e-dividend payment, issues around Islamic finance or non-interest finance. That are the core of the infrastructure development of the market. So what we want to do is use these tools to further deepen the market. And then the major market operators like NGX, NASD, FMDQ all made presentations at that meeting. So which also, they also brought to the fore some of their own initiatives and strategies to further improve their impact on the market.
What points did you pick for Nigeria from the latest Global Financial Stability Report? We're trying to piggyback on some of the key points at the IMF World Bank spring meetings. The Global Financial Stability Report, did it give you any confidence about the state of the global financial system and banking sector to be particular?
Well, what I would say is that if you look at that report, which had 3 pillars, one is global financial system and impact on high inflation rate and high interest rate. Of course, we've seen the impact of high inflation rate and high interest rate on some, particularly Western banks, we saw the collapse of SV Bank, which was largely driven by higher rate of inflation, higher rate of interest rate. That's the Silicon Valley Bank. We've seen the collapse of First Republic Bank. We've seen the collapse of Signature Bank. And in Europe, we've also seen the collapse and acquisition of Credit Suisse, which simply means that the high inflation rate, which has led to consistent tightening, has led to higher level of vulnerability of the banking system. Because most banks were holding large pool of assets at lower interest rates, and with higher inflation rate, higher interest rate that the central banks globally have now implemented, most of these banks are holding assets whose values have depreciated because of higher inflation, particularly when you talk of bond assets. And that for me, it also applies to some Nigerian banks. Of course, we've seen Nigerian banks take some major write-downs from their portfolios in Ghanaian sovereign bonds and Ghanaian euro bonds. I mean, Ghanaian local currency bonds and Ghanaian euro bonds. And the second leg of it, which is a non-bank financial intermediaries impact, vulnerability. I don't think the Nigerian Central Bank has taken a strong look at that because of the connectivity of the non-bank financial institutions. If you look at the microfinance banks, they may also have an uptick in non-performing loans, given that the core bank, the deposit money banks are also already having an uptick in non-performing loans. So the Central Bank of Nigeria needs to pay a lot more attention to non-bank financial institutions like the microfinance banks. And then the other leg of it, which is the issue of geopolitical vulnerability, particularly as it relates to fragmented financial systems, where many third world economies like Ghana, like Nigeria, are suffering from reverse capital flow, and we're seeing high, low pricing or low valuation of their sovereign bonds and higher interest rates or higher yield on their instruments, which is constraining them from accessing global financial market or global credit. So these are factors that most of them have direct impact on the Nigerian financial system. Given that one of the recommendations that the central bank should ensure that the banks have more robust capital base, higher level of liquidity. I think on that note, I think Nigerian Central Bank has actually come up with, of course, we have higher cash reserve ratio simply means that the banks indirectly have higher liquidity because the monies they kept with banks have 32.5% of their total deposits. Simply means that will serve as a cushion in case of some liquidity pressures. And the banks are still maintaining 30% liquidity ratio. And I also believe that a reasonable number of Nigerian banks have strong capital base.
Very interesting. Okay, thank you so much for your time and those contributions on the economy and the markets. Thank you so much. Enjoy your evening. Sir Justin Chukwu, the Group CEO at Carrier Asset Management.